The arrival of the Supreme. The galaxy was not silent. For thousands of years, countless species had risen, fallen, and fought for control of the stars. Some built empires of trade, others built kingdoms of war. But none of them were ready when the Supremes arrived. They came from the deep black, from a corner of space no one had dared to explore. Their ships were enormous, built like floating fortresses of steel and fire. Entire fleets appeared without warning, and wherever they went, destruction followed. Planets that resisted were burned to ash. Civilizations that refused to bow were erased. The Supremes did not conquer to rule. They conquered to prove their power. They called themselves the Alpha of the galaxy, the chosen ones, the natural masters of all life. Their voices echoed through the communications of dying worlds. We are the Supreme. You exist because we allow it. Resist and you will vanish. Most believed them. How could they not? The Supremes crushed the Trivans, a proud warrior species that had survived for 10,000 years. They silenced the Harnack traders who once controlled the richest star routes. They even erased the Coral dynasty, which ruled an empire of 50 planets. Every race that stood before them ended the same way, obliterated, forgotten, erased from history. Fear spread like fire through the galaxy. Entire systems surrendered without a fight, begging to be spared. The Supremes enjoyed it. To them, every kneeling species was proof of their destiny. They fed on obedience and crushed defiance. Their fleets grew larger, their arrogance greater. In their eyes, there was no one left who could stand against them. Then, one day, they found Earth. At first, the Supremes laughed. Humanity was young compared to the ancient species of the galaxy. Their colonies were small, their fleets still expanding, their star systems few. To the Supremes, humans were nothing more than a weak and scattered race, easy prey. A message was sent to Earth. It was not an offer. It was a command. Bow to the Supreme. Accept your place as servants or be erased. The galaxy watched, expecting humans to fall like all the others. Some even whispered that Earth would burn within weeks. But humanity did not kneel. On Earth, leaders met in silence. They remembered history. They remembered every empire that had risen, declaring itself unbeatable only to fall. And they remembered what it meant to be human, to fight when no hope remained, to stand when surrender seemed easier. When the Supreme Fleet arrived in human space, they came with laughter and arrogance. Their massive ships blocked out the stars. Their commanders expected surrender within hours, but what they found was different. The first human warship appeared alone, floating in the darkness of a ruined star system. Its hull was scarred from old battles, its engines glowing faintly. To the Supremes, it looked like prey. They sent a squadron of ships to destroy it, confident it would fall in seconds. Yet the warship did not run. It moved with precision, turning its cannons toward the attackers. In the silence of space, blue fire erupted from its weapons. One by one, the Supreme ships fell, broken and burning. The Supremes were stunned. A single human warship had destroyed their squadron. This was not weakness. This was defiance. The commander of the Supreme Fleet growled in fury. More ships were sent. More weapons fired. But again, the humans fought with a strange, cold determination. They did not fight like the others who begged for mercy. They fought as if they had already decided to win or die. For the first time in centuries, the Supremes felt something new. Not anger, not pride, fear. The galaxy trembled as rumors spread. Could humans resist them? Could this small young species defy the masters of the stars? The Supremes laughed it off, but inside their arrogance cracked. They had underestimated something they could not understand. Because humans were not like the others. Humans were stubborn. Humans were dangerous. And in the cold silence of space, as the wreckage of the first clash drifted among the stars, one thing became clear. The Supremes had made a mistake. A mistake they would never forget. They had awakened humanity, and humanity was not going to kneel. The first clash, the Supreme Fleet did not forget the loss of their first squadron. To them, it was not just a defeat, it was an insult. No one dared stand against them, not for centuries. And now, a young species had dared to fight back. The supreme commander of the fleet, a being named Zorath, gathered his war council. His voice thundered through the chamber as he declared that humans would be crushed without mercy. He promised that Earth would become nothing more than a burned rock, and its people scattered as dust across the stars. His officers roared in agreement. but some of them carried doubt in their eyes. The Supremes believed themselves unbreakable, but the destruction of their squadron haunted them. Whispers spread among the crew. If one human warship can do this, what else can they do? To prove their power, Zorath sent an armada, 50 massive battleships escorted by hundreds of smaller craft. Their destination was a human colony on the edge of known space, a place called Helios Station. It was a mining world rich in resources but poorly defended. The Supremes thought it would be an easy target, a chance to crush human spirit with a single devastating blow. But when they arrived, something was wrong. The station did not flee. The humans did not broadcast a surrender. Instead, silence filled the void. The asteroid belt surrounding Helios was quiet, too quiet. The Supreme Armada advanced, their cannons glowing, their fighters swarming ahead. Then it began. From the shadows of the asteroids, human warships emerged. Not one, not two, but dozens. Their hulls reflected no light, painted black like the emptiness around them. Their engines flared only for moments, vanishing again into the dark. These were not warships built for show. They were weapons built for killing. The Supreme Fleet fired first, confident their numbers would overwhelm. Beams of red light tore through the void, striking asteroids and shattering them into dust. But the humans did not fight directly. They vanished, reappeared, struck with precision, and disappeared again. Supreme ships exploded one after another, their massive hulls splitting apart in silence. Fire blooming in the black. Zorath roared in fury as he ordered his forces to close ranks. Yet the tighter they formed, the more they became prey. Human missiles tore through their defenses. Torpedoes slipped past shields and erupted within their cores. The Supremes were used to fighting enemies who broke in fear. But the humans did not break. They fought like predators who had studied every weakness, every blind spot. For hours, the battle raged. The asteroid field burned with fire. Wreckage floated in every direction. The Supremes threw everything they had into the fight, but nothing worked. The humans had turned the battlefield itself into a weapon. The asteroids that once seemed harmless became traps, hiding missiles, mines, and ambushes. At last, Zorath's pride began to crack. He realized he was not fighting a weak species. He was fighting something worse. He was fighting a species that refused to surrender, a species that had prepared for this moment, a species that would rather die than kneel. His fleet was broken. Nearly half his ships were destroyed. The rest limped away, engines burning, hulls torn apart. Helios Station still stood untouched. And the humans, those small, defiant creatures, still waited in the shadows, ready to strike again. The galaxy felt the shock. Word spread like wildfire. For the first time in living memory, the Supremes had been defeated in open battle. Entire species whispered of it in secret. Some laughed in disbelief, others dared to hope. If the Supremes could bleed, maybe they could be beaten. But no one felt it more than the Supremes themselves. Their arrogance was their strength, but now that strength cracked. Zorath tried to twist the truth, claiming the humans had used tricks, that the Supremes had been unprepared. But the soldiers who fought in that battle knew the truth. They had seen human warships move like hunters, precise and merciless. They had watched their proud fleet burn. And deep inside, even Zorath could not escape the truth. The humans were dangerous. He swore revenge. He promised that the full might of the Supreme Empire would descend upon Earth and erase it forever. He believed it, but in his heart a small seed of fear had taken root, because the Supremes had never faced enemies like this before. They had faced warriors. They had faced rebels. They had faced empires, but humans were none of these. Humans were something new. They were the beginning of an end the Supremes could not see. And as Zorath's broken fleet limped back into the darkness of space, the humans watched silently from their warships, their eyes cold and unyielding. This was only the first clash. The real war had just begun. Humanity's secret weapon, the Supreme Empire, did not rest after the humiliation at Helios Station. Across their territory, leaders raged, commanders shouted, and fear began to spread like a sickness. For centuries they had been untouchable, but now a scar marked their pride. They had faced a young species and bled. Zorath, the commander who suffered the defeat, was summoned before the High Council of the Supremes. The chamber was vast, filled with towering figures wrapped in silver armor. Their eyes burned with fury as they demanded an explanation. How had a race of primitives held back their mighty fleet? Zorath bowed his head and spoke of shadows, traps, and weapons that cut through shields like knives. He tried to twist the truth to claim he had been unlucky, but the council was not blind. They had seen the recordings of the battle. They had seen human ships vanish into the dark and strike with perfect precision. They had seen supreme cruisers, proud and massive, explode under human fire. One word began to echo among them: weapon. The humans had something no one else possessed, and if they had it, the balance of power across the galaxy was shifting. The Supremes launched spies, probes, and hunters into human space. They wanted answers. They wanted the secret. Yet every attempt failed. Their spies vanished without a trace. Their probes never returned. And their hunters, powerful and feared, never reported back. It was as if the humans were waiting for them, watching from the darkness, erasing every trace of intrusion. What the Supremes did not know was that humanity had been preparing for decades. Long before the Supremes arrived, humans had studied them. Traitors whispered of their cruelty. Survivors of broken worlds sent warnings, and Earth listened. Humanity, unlike other races, did not wait to be conquered. They watched. They learned. And in secret, they built. Hidden deep within asteroid belts, inside hollowed moons, and beneath oceans on distant colonies, humans constructed weapons no one else dared to imagine. Their warships were not made to shine with gold or stand as monuments. They were built to kill. Stealth plating wrapped them in shadows. Engines ran silent. Their weapons were designed not for intimidation but for destruction, but that was not all. Humanity had something even greater than ships. They had minds. Where other species fought with tradition, humans fought with creativity. They broke rules, invented new strategies, and tested weapons in ways no one else had dared. They had learned to wage war not with numbers but with ideas. One weapon in particular terrified even their own leaders when it was first tested. It was called the Spear of Dawn, a single device, compact and deadly, that could tear through the shields of the largest warship and split it in half with one strike. Only a handful existed, hidden aboard the most secretive human vessels. When the Supremes discovered whispers of this weapon, they laughed at first. But when one of their dreadnoughts vanished without a trace near the rim of human space, their laughter stopped. The wreckage, later found drifting cold and lifeless, showed a single wound running straight through its core, as if a spear of light had pierced it cleanly. The Supremes realized then that humans were not improvising. They were not lucky. They had prepared. The galaxy began to notice too. Other species watched from the shadows, trembling in disbelief. For years they had believed the Supremes were unbreakable, yet here was a race that had not only resisted but had built weapons to destroy them. Hope, fragile and dangerous, began to spark in hearts across the stars. But hope was not what humans wanted to give. They were not fighting for the galaxy. They were fighting for survival. Inside secret war rooms on Earth, human leaders spoke quietly, far from the ears of the Supremes. They knew this war was not about territory. It was not about pride. It was about extinction. If the Supremes won, humanity would vanish. If humanity won, the Supremes would vanish. There was no middle ground. Commanders placed their hands on star maps glowing with red and blue. They moved fleets like pieces on a chessboard, knowing every mistake could cost millions of lives. Scientists whispered about weapons that had never been tested. Soldiers trained in silence, waiting for battles they might never survive. And somewhere, deep in space, a fleet of human warships moved unseen, carrying the Spears of Dawn. The Supremes continued to send armadas, larger and larger each time. They still believed numbers would win. They still believed size meant power. But every battle ended the same way: Supreme ships destroyed. Human ships vanishing back into the dark, waiting for the next strike. The arrogance of the Supremes began to rot into fear. Entire crews spoke of human ghosts in the void, ships that appeared from nowhere and killed without warning. Some even whispered that humans were not flesh and blood but shadows of death itself. And yet, the Supremes could not stop. Their pride chained them. To retreat was to admit weakness. To admit weakness was to lose their empire, but humanity did not stop either. With every battle, their confidence grew. With every strike, their weapons sharpened. With every victory, the end of the Supremes drew closer. The galaxy had thought the Supremes were eternal. But now, as wreckage of their fleets drifted through the stars, a new truth was born. Humanity was the hidden weapon of the galaxy, and the Supremes had awakened it. The fall of the Supremes, the Supreme Empire stretched across hundreds of systems, its banners planted on worlds that once belonged to countless races. For centuries, those banners never fell. But now the unthinkable was happening. One by one, Supreme outposts went silent. Their fleets returned broken. Their commanders returned in shame. Whispers spread across the galaxy. Entire colonies spoke of human warships that appeared from the void, struck with precision, and vanished before the Supremes could answer. Some called them shadows. Others called them demons. But all agreed on one thing. The Supremes were no longer untouchable. Inside the throne world of the Empire, the High Council raged. They ordered Zorath and his remaining fleets to gather the full strength of the Supremes. If humans wanted war, they would see the storm of the Alpha race. And so it began. The largest armada in Supreme history was assembled. Thousands of ships, from towering dreadnoughts to swarms of fighters, gathered like a black tide. Their engines burned across the stars, their weapons glowing like suns. The galaxy trembled, certain that no force could stand against such power. But the humans were waiting. In the quiet darkness of an uncharted system, the trap was set. Asteroids drifted lazily across space, but hidden within them were mines, cannons, and human warships cloaked in shadow. The Supreme Armada entered, believing they were hunting their prey. In truth, they had walked into the jaws of death. The first strike came without warning. A spear of light split through a dreadnought, tearing it apart in an instant. Before the Supremes could react, missiles and torpedoes erupted from the asteroids, shredding their formations. Human warships emerged like predators, weaving between the giants, striking at their weak points and vanishing again. The Supremes fired back with fury. Beams of red light scorched the void, burning through rocks and chasing shadows. Entire asteroids shattered into dust. But for every human ship they destroyed, 10 more appeared from the darkness. The battlefield became chaos. Fire, wreckage, and the screams of ships tearing apart. Zorath, standing at the heart of the armada, bellowed commands. His voice shook with desperation. He had promised the High Council victory. He could not return with defeat. Yet as the battle raged, he saw the truth. His mighty armada was being hunted. The humans fought not as soldiers, but as survivors. Every move was calculated. Every strike designed to bleed the Supremes dry. They had studied their enemy, and now the Supremes were trapped in a storm of their own arrogance. Hours passed, though in the silence of space it felt endless. One by one, the proud ships of the Supremes fell. Dreadnoughts cracked open like shells. Cruisers burned, drifting into the void. Fighters scattered, leaderless and terrified. Zorath's pride collapsed with every explosion. He could see it now. The Supremes were not supreme. They were prey, and humanity was the hunter. In desperation, he ordered a retreat. The surviving ships turned, engines roaring, fleeing the battlefield. But the humans had already sealed their fate. Mines blocked the escape routes. Human fleets closed in from every side. The trap was complete. The retreat became a slaughter. Supreme ships, once symbols of fear, were torn apart as they tried to run. Their mighty armada, their greatest force, was reduced to wreckage and flame. Zorath's flagship shuddered as explosions tore through its hull. His last sight before darkness claimed him was not victory, but the cold, merciless fire of human weapons. When the battle ended, silence fell across the system. Where once the Supreme Fleet had burned with pride, now only debris remained. Broken steel, shattered hulls, and drifting bodies swallowed by the endless void. The galaxy held its breath. News spread faster than light. The Supremes, the masters of the stars, had fallen. Entire species that once knelt in fear lifted their heads in disbelief. For the first time in memory, hope returned to the galaxy. But humanity did not celebrate. In war rooms across Earth and its colonies, commanders looked at the wreckage reports with cold eyes. They knew this was not the end. The Supremes still held worlds, still had armies, still had pride. And pride was dangerous. Yet the truth could no longer be hidden. The Supremes were not eternal. They could be defeated. They had been defeated. The empire that once called itself Alpha was breaking. Its fleets were ashes. Its people whispered of rebellion. Its rulers drowned in fear. And at the center of it all stood humanity, a young race that had refused to kneel. The fall of the Supremes had begun, and there would be no mercy. Wiped out forever. The Supreme Empire was bleeding. Their fleets were gone, their colonies trembling, their commanders broken. Worlds that once bowed in silence now whispered rebellion. Across the galaxy, the name Supreme no longer inspired fear. It inspired pity, but the humans were not finished. For humanity, this war had never been about pride. It had never been about territory or conquest. It was survival. They knew that if even a fragment of the Supreme Empire endured, the threat would return. And so humanity chose the path no one else had dared. They would erase the Supremes forever. The decision was made in silence in war rooms filled with grim faces. Generals, admirals, and leaders of Earth spoke few words, but all agreed. The Supremes would be wiped out, not defeated, not humbled, erased. The final target was the Supreme Homeworld, a massive planet at the heart of their empire. It was surrounded by fleets, guarded by colossal defense platforms and armed with weapons strong enough to destroy entire armadas. The Supremes believed it was untouchable. They believed it would stand as long as their empire existed. But belief could not stop what was coming. The human fleet moved with silence. Thousands of ships, dark and cold, approached the system like shadows drifting through the void. They did not announce themselves. They did not give warnings. They came as hunters, and their prey was the heart of an empire. The first strike shattered the outer defenses. Mines hidden in the rings of the system exploded, tearing through Supreme patrols. Human warships slipped past detection, striking platforms before alarms could even sound. The mighty walls of the Supremes cracked in minutes. Then came the fleet. From every angle, human ships swarmed into the system. Missiles streaked across the void. Torpedoes pierced the shields of massive fortresses. The spears of dawn, humanity's deadliest weapons, fired their light into the heart of the defenders. Supreme dreadnoughts built to last centuries split apart like fragile glass. The defenders fought with fury, but it was hopeless. Every strategy they tried, humans had already prepared for. Every trap they laid, humans turned against them. What had once been their strength, their arrogance, was now their weakness. They could not adapt. They could not change. And against humanity, that meant death. As the fleet burned, the Supreme Council gathered in their throne chambers. Their voices rose in panic. Some demanded surrender. Others demanded escape, but there was no escape. The humans were already inside the system. Their ships drew closer with every moment. The humans gave no reply to the desperate transmissions. No terms, no mercy, only silence. At last, the warships of Earth reached orbit over the Supreme Homeworld. The planet's surface glowed with cities that stretched for continents. Towers reaching toward the sky, armies waiting in terror. Billions of lives stared upward as the black silhouettes of human ships blotted out their stars. The final order was given. The spears of dawn fired. The sky above the Supreme Homeworld turned to fire. Beams of white light pierced the planet's defenses, slicing through shields, fortresses, and towers. Missiles rained down, striking with precision. The surface shook as oceans boiled and mountains cracked. Entire cities crumbled under the storm. The Supremes screamed. They begged for mercy. They offered surrender. But humanity did not answer. They remembered the worlds the Supremes had erased. The lives burned without mercy. The empires destroyed for pride. Now the same judgment had come for them. Hours later, the planet was silent. Where once a proud world had stood, only ruins remained. Smoke choked the skies, cities lay in ash, and the throne of the Supremes was broken beyond repair. The species that once called themselves Alpha, the self-proclaimed masters of the stars, were gone. Not reduced, not defeated, erased. Across the galaxy, the news spread. Species that once feared the Supremes wept with relief. Some celebrated, others trembled, for they realized a new truth. The balance of power had shifted. The age of the Supremes had ended, and in their place humanity had risen. But the humans did not call themselves masters. They did not send out declarations of empire. They returned to silence, their fleets drifting home. They had fought not for glory, but for survival. And yet, the galaxy would never forget what they had done. The Supremes were wiped from existence.